At 73 years old, she stood in an empty garage that had, until 3 days earlier, contained 31 years of accumulated belongings, watching a final buyer load the last item, her late husband's woodworking bench, into the back of a pickup truck, and found herself experiencing what she described as an entirely unexpected wave of relief, rather than the grief she had braced herself for throughout the preceding months of selling nearly everything she owned. This is her story, and she wanted it told with genuine specificity about what actually motivated a decision that several people in her life had initially assumed represented some form of crisis, rather than the carefully considered choice it actually was. She had raised 4 children largely as the primary caregiver, while her husband worked a demanding career in commercial construction, a partnership that had, by her own honest description, functioned well for most of their 46 years together, but had left her, following his death from a heart attack 3 years earlier, in a specific and somewhat disorienting position she had not fully anticipated navigating. Her 4 adult children were spread across 3 different states, none within a reasonable driving distance of her longtime home outside Nashville, and she had found herself, in the 3 years since her husband's passing, managing a 5-bedroom house that had once been full of family activity, but now largely echoed, maintaining it primarily out of habit and a vague sense of obligation, rather than any genuine, ongoing need for that much space or that specific location. The decision to consider Thailand specifically, rather than the considerably more commonly discussed Philippines that appears in most American retirement content, emerged through a former neighbor who had relocated there 4 years earlier following her own retirement, and who had described, during an extended phone call that lasted nearly 3 hours, a specific quality of daily life that captured her attention in a way considerable other research had not, a particular emphasis on Buddhist-influenced daily rhythm and public spaces genuinely designed around walking and gathering rather than automobile dependence, combined with healthcare infrastructure that her former neighbor, a retired nurse herself, described as genuinely comparable to strong American private healthcare at a fraction of the cost. She spent nearly 8 months researching before making any final decision, a process she wanted to describe with genuine specificity because she felt it distinguished her approach from what she perceived as a more common pattern of retirement relocation decisions made primarily on emotional impulse, following a life transition like widowhood. She calculated her actual financial position with considerable care, her husband's life insurance combined with his pension survivor benefit, and her own Social Security providing approximately $3,100 monthly, a genuinely comfortable figure by most measures, but one that, combined with the specific ongoing costs of maintaining a large American home designed for a family considerably larger than the household of one it now contained, left meaningfully less margin than she felt her remaining years deserved. Before we get into what she actually built once she arrived, subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell. Every week on this channel, we share real, honest stories of Americans starting over overseas. Not the polished version, the honest one. Subscribe now so you never miss one. The conversation with her 4 children, she wanted to note directly, had produced a genuinely mixed initial response that she felt deserved honest acknowledgement rather than a tidy narrative of unanimous family support. Her eldest daughter, living in Colorado, had responded with what she described as immediate and enthusiastic support, having independently researched and discussed retirement abroad herself in the years since her father's death. Her second child, a son in Georgia, had expressed genuine concern centered specifically on medical access should a serious health crisis arise, a concern she had taken seriously enough to research extensively before her final decision, rather than dismissing. Her 2 younger children, both still raising their own families and somewhat less directly involved in the ongoing conversation, given their own demanding circumstances, had expressed a more general and diffuse worry, less about the specific decision and more about the underlying assumption that her choice reflected some form of unprocessed grief or genuine crisis, rather than a deliberate and considered life decision. a concern she addressed directly through several extended family conversations before her actual departure. Conversations she credited with meaningfully improving the family's collective understanding, even where full enthusiasm was not initially universal. She settled in Chiang Mai, a city in northern Thailand she had specifically chosen after her 8 months of research identified it as offering a particular combination of established expatriate infrastructure, genuine and accessible healthcare, specifically including several hospitals with dedicated international patient departments staffed by English-speaking medical professionals, and a considerably lower cost of living than the more internationally prominent Bangkok, a factor that had weighed heavily in her final decision, given her specific financial calculations. Her monthly living costs, tracked carefully across her first full year, ran to approximately $1,500, including a comfortable one-bedroom condominium in a secure building with amenities she found genuinely valuable at her age, a pool she used regularly for low-impact exercise her doctor had recommended for joint health, and a fitness center she had not anticipated using as consistently as she ultimately did. The specific daily life she built, she wanted to describe with genuine detail rather than general characterization, centered significantly around a Buddhist meditation center within walking distance of her condominium, a practice she had approached initially with what she described as mild skepticism, rooted in her own lifelong Methodist background, but which had, over her first year, become a genuinely significant source of both community connection and what she described as a meaningfully different relationship with grief and aging than she had developed during her 3 years of widowhood in Tennessee. She attended sessions several mornings weekly, alongside a mixed group of local Thai practitioners and fellow foreign residents, and credited the specific combination of structured contemplative practice and consistent community gathering with producing a genuine shift in her own relationship with both her husband's death and her own advancing age, one she found difficult to fully articulate, but described as considerably more peaceful than anything she had accessed through her previous grief processing in the United States. She wanted to be direct about a specific health scare that had tested her original research regarding Thailand's medical infrastructure, an experience she felt was important to include, given how significantly healthcare access had factored into her son's initial concerns before her move. Roughly 14 months into her time in Chiang Mai, she experienced chest pain significant enough to warrant an emergency room visit, a genuinely frightening experience given her husband's cardiac history and her own awareness of her age-related risk factors. The hospital she visited, one specifically recommended during her original research for its international patient department, provided what she described as genuinely excellent and rapid care. Comprehensive cardiac testing completed within hours, rather than the days she had heard described in some American emergency room contexts, ultimately determining the pain stemmed from a treatable digestive issue rather than any cardiac event, at a total cost, including the emergency visit, extensive testing, and follow-up consultation, of approximately $640, a figure she noted with specific emphasis, given how differently that same sequence of care might have affected her finances under equivalent American emergency treatment. Without the kind of comprehensive insurance coverage, many retirees her age genuinely struggle to maintain. She has, over her now 3 years in Chiang Mai, built what she described as a specific and meaningful role within her local meditation community, having begun, roughly 18 months into her time there, informally mentoring several younger American and European expatriates navigating their own grief or major life transitions, a role that emerged organically from her own experience rather than any formal position, but one she found genuinely significant in giving structure and purpose to what she described, with some emotion, as the first period in her adult life where her daily activities were determined entirely by her own interests and values, rather than the needs of her husband, her children, or her broader family obligations that had structured most of her preceding 5 decades. Her relationship with her 4 children, she wanted to note, has developed considerably since her initial departure, with her eldest and second children both having visited Thailand at least once, visits she described as genuinely warm and, in her son's case specifically, meaningfully reassuring regarding the medical infrastructure concerns he had originally raised, having seen the actual hospital and general healthcare environment directly, rather than relying solely on her own second-hand description. Her two younger children remained, by her honest account, somewhat less actively engaged with her new life, a dynamic she attributed primarily to their own demanding family circumstances, rather than any ongoing disapproval, and one she managed through regular video calls and an annual extended visit to the United States, timed specifically around major family gatherings and grandchildren's significant milestones. When asked what she would tell another widow or widower considering a similar significant relocation following the loss of a spouse, her answer focused specifically on the distinction between grief-driven impulse and genuinely considered decision-making, a distinction she felt mattered enormously to how both the decision itself and the family response to it ultimately unfolded. She recommended, directly, allowing genuine time to pass following a spouse's death before making any irreversible major life decision. Not out of any belief that grief must fully resolve before meaningful life changes become appropriate, but specifically to ensure the eventual decision reflects considered values and genuine desire for a specific, different life, rather than an impulsive attempt to simply escape an environment now saturated with painful memory. A distinction she felt her own 8 months of careful research and financial calculation had helped her family recognize and ultimately respect, even where full initial enthusiasm was not universal. If you are watching this and are considering a significant relocation following the loss of a spouse, she wanted to leave you with the specific reframe her own 3 years of experience had produced. The question worth asking honestly, before any major decision, is not simply whether you want to leave the specific place associated with your loss, a desire she considered genuinely understandable and not something to feel ashamed of, but whether you have identified, with real specificity, what kind of life you actually want to build next, rather than simply what you want to move away from. Since she believed that distinction, clarified through her own extended research process, had made the difference between a decision her family could ultimately understand and support, and one that might have simply read, to the people who loved her, as an unprocessed escape from grief, rather than the genuine and considered new chapter it actually became. Subscribe to Second Life Abroad and turn on the notification bell. Share this with someone you know who has experienced the loss of a spouse and is beginning to consider what their own next chapter might genuinely look like. We will see you in the next one. There is a specific practical dimension of the visa and long-term residency process she wanted addressed directly, because she said it represented a genuinely more complicated administrative reality than her original research had adequately prepared her for, despite her generally thorough 8-month preparation process. Thailand's retirement visa system, unlike the more straightforward pathways available in some other popular retirement destinations, required annual renewal with specific and periodically shifting financial requirements, including a minimum bank deposit maintained in a Thai financial institution that had, during her 3 years there, increased twice, each time requiring her to transfer additional funds from her American accounts to maintain compliance. She recommended, specifically, working with a reputable local visa service rather than attempting to navigate the annual renewal process entirely independently, a decision that cost her approximately $200 annually, but that she credited with preventing several potential complications, including one instance where a specific documentation requirement had changed with relatively little advance notice, a change her visa service had flagged and helped her address before it became a genuine problem, in a way she doubted she would have caught independently, given the specific bureaucratic Thai language notices involved. She wanted this detail included specifically because she felt most retirement content, including her own original research, tended to treat visa acquisition as a single completed task, rather than an ongoing annual administrative relationship requiring continued attention and modest but real recurring cost, a distinction she believed mattered considerably for anyone building a long-term financial projection for